We are going to start by creating a new Blazor project. And as you're seeing, I am having this Visual Studio opened, and I'm going to click on where it's written create a new project. And there will be a lot of templates to choose from, but I'm going to choose this Blazor server app, and I'm going to click on next. And it will prompt me to input the name of this project, and I'm going to call this as local. And this will be also the name of the solution name. And as we are having one project, there is no need to change the solution name. I'm going to go ahead and click on next, and it will ask me the framework that I need to use. And as I'm using the server, the Blazor server app, it is not suggesting me to use this .NET 7. And I'm going to leave this as it is. We will have to perform the same project with .NET 8 later on, but it's not necessary to start it with .NET 8. It will be optional if you want to upgrade it to .NET 8. And I'm going to go ahead and click on create. Wonderful. And once the project is created, we can go ahead and try to run it to ensure that it is running smoothly before you perform any other action. And when you do that by pressing this play button, and we'll have to run our application, and whenever we see the default Blazor app interface, we'll be sure that our app is running as expected. So we have to give this a go and see how it is going to look like. Voila! You can see that now the app is running as expected, and all the functionalities that you can expect from a Blazor app are being provided. So I'm going to close this window because we don't need that for a moment. And you're going to start by performing all the localization and needs. And we start by installing the required package. On the dependencies, I'm going to right click and go to manage NuGet packages and wait until it opens. And once we are in here, we need to add a package to support the localization. And I'm going to type Microsoft.extensions.localization, like this one. And it is not localization. Let me write localization the way it's written, like this. And you see that there will be a bunch of packages, but I'm going to choose this one that has a lot of downloads, up to 352 millions. And pay attention when it comes to version. As we are using .NET 7, we need to also use the version of 7.0.14, which is now the current version for .NET 7. And I'm going to go ahead and install. As we are having only one project, I'm going to go ahead and click on install and wait. As when it prompts you to add these changes, I'm going to apply them and also accept the license agreement. And once this is done, I'm going to close this. And as we are going to be using now the translations, we will need the folder that will contain all the resources that we are going to use while performing the translations. And I'm going to create a new folder for that. I'm going to go on where it's written local, and I'm going to right click, add, and I'm going to add a folder, and I'm going to call this as resources. Okay, after we are done doing that, I'm going to go back to the program. And what we are going to do here, we are going now to add services to the container. And in here, I'm going to also add other services here. I'm going to go down here and say builder.services.add, and I'm going to add the localization. And it's not prompting me, add localization. And in here, I'm going to provide the options that will be pointing to the resources folder that we created. And I'm going to say options, or any other name that we can call this, because I'm going to use this as a lambda expression. And I'm going to say options equal to options dot, and I'm going to get now the resource path, options dot resource path. And I'm going to be adding this as resources. And when it comes to hard coding this one, make sure you match now the spelling, because you don't get any typing safety when it comes to this one, and you can introduce some typos. Make sure you verify if this is matching the name that you called the folder, so as to avoid any kind of errors. And as we are going to be using localization, we'll be needing a bunch of options. I've seen many programmers busting all those options into the program class, and it make it busier and messy. And I decided to make my code clean, so I'm going to add add a new folder, and I'm going to create a new class that will be as a helper for the localization. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to create another folder, add another folder, and I'm going to call this as helpers. Okay, and inside this helpers folder, I'm going to add a new class that will help us with the localization stuffs. I'm going to add a new class, and I'm going to call this as let me call it localization helper. And this will be a helper class that will help us to deal with the localization. And this class will need to inject the configuration, so I'm going to create a constructor. So I'm going to create a constructor in here, and after creating the constructor, I'm going to inject the configuration, and I'm going to call this config. And after I'm done with this, I'm going to initialize the field from parameter, and I'm going to do like this one. I like it when it's looking like this one, and so every C# developer does. Okay, after we are done now injecting this configuration, I'm going to create a method that will help us to set now the localization options, and then we will have to get them whenever we inject this or we create the instance of this class. So I'm going to say public, and it will be a type of request localization options. This is now the type of this method, and it will be called get localization options. Okay, like this one. And I'm going to go inside this class, and the first thing that I need to do is now to add the value that will hold all the characters that we support on our website. So I'm going to say var characters will be equal to, I'm going to call the configuration, and I'm going to get the section, and the section that we're going to get will be now the section for characters, and we don't have that yet, but we're going to create it into our app settings.json. So I'm going to go into the app settings.json, and I'm going to add another section, and I'm going to call this section as characters, and I'm going to add now the key value pairs of the characters that will be supported on our website. You can add as many as you want, as long as you will be adding the configurations for their resources in your resources folder. So I'm going to add 2 for the demonstration purposes only. You can add as many as you need. It depends on the nature of your application. So I'm going to add the en for US, and I'm going to call this as English. English like this, not English like this one. And I'm going to add also the Spanish, and I'm going to add EAs for Spanish, Spanish like this one. Okay, and after I'm done with this, I can continue with with this one. You have seen that I'm adding this section as a parent. These are the children, and as those are the children, we are going to target them to get the exact values. So I'm going to continue my statement here, and I'm going to get the children, and after getting the children, we need to do something with these children. I'm going to add them to dictionary. So let me go down. I'm going to dictionary, and I'm going to use lambda to set the key and value. So I'm going to say x goes to x.key, and x goes to x.value. Let me use this suggestion, and after this I'm going to add another variable that will hold all the supported characters. So I'm going to say supported characters will be equal to, I'm going to say the character, and I'm interested only in keys. Okay, I'm going to take only the keys from these characters, because we're mapping this to key and value, but we are only interested in obtaining the keys. After we are done getting the keys, we need also to cast to array like this one, and boom. Okay, after this we need also to make another variable for the localization options. And what this will take, we have to make the instance of this, and we say new request localization options, and I'm going to pass in the supported characters, and I'm going to say that there will be supported characters, and also I'm going to add the add supported. Here I messed up. Let me bring it down here and say add supported characters, and I'm going to say supported characters, and also add supported UI characters like this one, and pass in the supported characters too. And after we are done with this, I'm going to return now the localization options, and I'm going to go back to my program.cs, and below this one I'm going to initialize, I'm going to make an instance of that localization helper. And the way we do that, I'm going to say I'm going to store into a variable, and I'm going to say local equal to new localization helper, and inside it will ask me to put in some of the configuration, and I'm going to use the my builder.configuration, and they're done. And after we are done with this one, we are going to also add as we are going to use MVC to interact with our Blazor apps, I'm going to register also the controllers. I'm going to say builder.services.add controllers. Don't forget this one, add controllers. And we also need to map the controllers, and below here, after routing here, I'm going to go ahead and map the controllers. App.map controllers, map controllers. Let me say app.map controllers. Here it is. And also below this use static files, I'm going to make the use of the localization. So the way we do that, I'm going to say app.use localization, and I have to put in the options, and I'm going to say local.get localization options, and like this one. And you can see that now our program.cs is now clean. We should have been added all of these things, but it's kind of like messy and not clean. I'm going to go ahead, after we are done with all of these, I'm going to add a controller. And no matter what, if you are using Blazor or any other kind of .NET project, it is possible that you can borrow or use any other behaviors. For example, I'm using Blazor app, but I'm going to use the MVC behaviors in here. It's like another advantage to the .NET projects. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'm going to call this as controllers, and it will be the one that will contain all the controllers that we are going to be using. And actually it's one, I'm going to add a new controller, and it will be name of VC empty controller. So I'm going to call this as culture controller and press enter. And inside this controller, below the namespace, I'm going to add now the load, and I'm going to say load. I'm going to use let me use now the controller and also the action. And here we'll see where we need to use this kind of approach. And as we were creating the controller, it will come up with the default endpoint for the index, but we can use this one and rename according to our need. And I'm going to call this as let me call this as set culture, and we have to have two parameters. The string for culture, and there is a string for redirect URI. Okay, whenever we're going to hit or we're going to access this controller, we need to set a cookie on our browser to store the language that will be selected, and that language will persist into our browser no matter which endpoint will be navigating to. So I'm going to first check if now the value for the culture is not empty, because if it's empty, we don't need to do anything. So I'm going to say if now the culture the parameters not nar, and if it's not nar, we are going to say http context context dot, and I'm going to say response dot cookies, and I'm going to append into cookies. And what I'm going to append, I'm going to use cookie request culture provider, and I'm going to say default cookie name, and that will be the first parameter. I'm going to add another one, and for again it's a cookie request culture provider, and I'm going to say make cookie value, and I'm going to pass in a new request culture, and I'm going to request the culture that will be from the parameter, and I'm going to close this, make culture new, and here is the problem. Okay, all right, so after we are done with this, I'm going to return, and I'm going to use this local redirect, and I'm going to use the redirect URI. After we are done with this, we are going now to create the component. The component that we are going to create will be the one that will help us to choose the language. And I'm going to go into now the shared folder, and this is where I'm going to create the Blazor component. I'm going to make a right click in here, go on add a Blazor component, and I'm going to call this as choose language. And this component will be having this default code. We don't need this either, but we will need to inject the other dependencies that we will need to use in here. The first dependency that we will need is, I'm going to inject it, will be now the navigation manager, and I'm going to call this as navigation manager. And also I need to inject now the eye configuration as now the configuration. And inside here, I'm going to add now a private string to store the selected culture. So I'm going to say private string selected culture will be equal to system dot threading dot thread dot current thread dot current culture dot name, like this one. After we are done with that, I'm going to make a private dictionary that will hold all the cultures. So I'm going to say private dictionary, and this will be having a key of string and a value of string, like this one. Okay, and it will be called cultures. After we're done with that, we are going to override the onInitialized method, and we are going to add our own configuration. The way we do that, I'm going to say protected override void onInitialized, and it will bring this, and we don't need this either. We need to add our configuration, and the configuration that we're going to use will be kind of the same like we're having here. And you can go ahead and copy this because it's the same, and remember to change according to your need. When you copy paste, there will be some bad behaviors to the copied code according to the use. For example, we don't need to use these var cultures because we are going to initialize the cultures from this dictionary, and the configuration we already have that. I'm going to use the configuration. Okay, and after we're done with that, I'm going to go ahead, and you can see that I was able to go to the section, get cultures, get children, and to dictionary, which will be like this one. Okay, and after that, I'm going to need other two methods. We need the method to handle the selection change and the other method to handle the request culture change. The one will be used to for the selection, as we are going to select from the select box, and the other one will be for setting the culture and going to the controller. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me start by adding this one for the request culture change, and I'm going to say private void, and I'm going to say request culture change, and it's not going to take anything. And I'm going to say that I'm going to check if now the string is null or white space, and I'm going to say oops is null or white space, and the value that we're going to check if now the selected culture. Okay, if it is, I'm going to return. Okay, and if it's not empty, that we are going to continue with other execution. And first let me check another bracket here, and when you are sure that this is not empty, I'm going to say that var URI will be equal to new URI, and I'm going to use the navigation manager, and I'm going to point to URI, and I'm going to get the component, and I'm going to say URI dot component URI component dot path and query, and I'm going to add the second argument. Then the second argument will be now the format, the URI format. So I'm going to say URI format, and I'm going to say unescaped. After we are done with that, we are going now to make the query. And when I say about the query, there are some point when you go to the website. For example, let me show you. For example, let me say I'm on my website as hanumedia.com, and you will see there will be something like a question mark, and for example service equal to, for example, IT, and for example lang equal to en. And this is now the query that will come after this question mark, and we're going to use the same approach to set the language. So let's cross this and see on how that can be implemented. I'm going to say var var query URI, we're done with it, URI query, and I'm going to use now the string interpolation. And as I told you, we have to use this question mark, and we put the culture, and it will be equal to URI dot escape data string, and I'm going to pass in the selected culture like this one, and remember to cross. And after this, as we are going to also need to add the redirect URI as the second parameter, and I'm going to add this ampersand to indicate that you're going to add other parameters. I'm going to go down here to have a clean workspace, and I'm going to add now another string interpolation. I'm going to say that I'm going to put in the redirect URI, that will be equal to URI dot escape data string, and in this case we have to input the URI that we are having up here. And remember to cross this, and let's bring this up like this one. And now we are done with the query. And after we're getting this query, we can use it alongside our endpoint to go ahead and get the selected culture. So the way we do that, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to say that navigation manager is going to navigate to, and I'm going to add now the culture and set culture, and I'm going to add the query, and I'm going to also add the force. I'm going to add the force load, and I'm going to give the value as a true, so it will have to refresh our page to populate now the language that is being selected. And if you are asking what this means, remember back when we were creating the controller, we used to use this form, the controller name and the action, and the action that we're having on here is the set culture, and that's the exact one that we are choosing here, and we are going to add the query to match the format that I used to give you on how the query is being created. After we are done with this, we're going to add a template. A template that we're going to add here is the one that will help us to select, and it will be like a language toggle. And the way we do that, we first need to check if we have the characters, because we don't need to add anything whenever we're having an empty value of characters. So if now the characters is not equal to nar, we're going to first add a div, and I'm going to give this a class of M3 or M2, it doesn't matter. I'm going to add a form, and this form will be having a class of form inline, and I'm going to add a select, and after adding this select, I'm going to give it a class, and the class that will be having it will be a form control. Okay, and we have to add the on change, and we forgot to add the method that will help us with this functionality, but we can add that really quick. And I'm going to make that method that will help us to initialize now the changes. I'm going to say private void, and it will be called, let me call this as handle select changes, or handle select change, and it will have to, it will be having the argument of change event args, and I'm going to call this as e, and inside I'm going to say the selected departure will be equal to e dot value dot to string, like this one. And after we select this selected departure, we can go ahead and call this function request character change, like this one. Okay, and whenever we navigate to this select menu, it will have to call this function. So on change, I'm going to say that to we handle select change, like this one. Okay, and inside here I'm going to add the default option for selection, and it will be called select language, and I'm going to add a loop to loop over the selected the supported characters. For each character in characters, I'm going to add the option, and it will be having a value of at character yeah, I forgot the character dot, and in here I'm going to choose the key as the value, as now the value for the option, and for the placeholder I'm going to use the character dot value. Okay, and after we are done with these, we are going now to go to the main layout components to add these. And the way we do that, I'm going to say as language and I'm going to add my component in here. So I'm going to say choose language like this. Okay, so I'm going to run this application to see if we can get the first starting functionalities from this. I'm going to go ahead and click on run, and voila, you can see that I'm having this language. And whenever I click on this toggle, you can see that I'm having the English. And whenever we click, there is nothing happening, but we're going to add that in a moment. And whenever we select this English or Spanish, whenever we select this language, we expect to store this value into a cookie. And the way we check our cookies, I'm going to inspect this, and I'm going to go to now this developer options. I'm going to go to where it's written application, and I'm going to go to where it's written cookies, and I'm going to choose this, which match our port. And you can see that there will be this cookie for ASP.NET Core.Culture, and whenever you click this, you can see that I'm having this as ENUS, but whenever I click on Spanish, you can see that it will be changed immediately after now the page reload. Okay, and after we are done with this, we're going to add now the resources that will help us now to populate our language to the resources that we are going to set. Okay, and the way we are going to do that, I'm going to go to the resources, and I'm going to add a new item. I'm going to show all the templates, and I'm going to search for a resource, and this will be a resource file. And I'm going to start by adding the default one, and the default one that I'm going to add will be called app. Okay, and we will wait until, and this will be the resources file will be represented as key and value pairs. I'm going to add the first one. I'm going to call this as hello, and I'm going to say I'm going to give the value of hello media. Okay, and this will be for English, or the default one. And I'm going to add another one, and I'm going to add a new item, a resource file, and I'm going to call this, for example, let me call it, and you have to respect the convention of this, because it can give you some headache whenever you name it to something weird. So I'm going to say this will be equal to app.es, and I'm going to add, because we use the es for this one, I'm going to leave it like this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on add, and the resources name have to match. So I'm going to also add the hello here, and I'm going to add the value for as hola and media, and I can add, for example, Spanish, to show you that it is being now replaced. Okay, so I'm having this as default one, and I'm having this again, and I'm going to save all of this. After saving, I'm going to close them so as to have a clean workspace. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the index, and here on the pages, I'm going to go into the index, and inside the index you have to inject now the localization, and you have to use also the iString localizer. So I'm going to go ahead and say at using, and I'm going to say Microsoft dot extensions dot localization. Okay, and also I'm going to inject the iString localizer, and we'll be having the type of app, and the app will indicate the global use, and I'm going to call this as localizer. And instead of using this as a hello word, I can go ahead and use now the localizer and point to the key that I set. For example, let me say localizer, and remember to add the at, as this is a part of the functional code, and I'm going to say that I'm going to point to hello like this one. Okay, And after we are done with this one, we can go ahead and check if this is working. So let me go ahead and run. And you can see that it was able to pull this from where it is. So whenever I click on Spanish, you can see that it was able to say hola Hano Media. It is now detecting the language as expected. And also when it comes to culture, we can also test on the time zones. And for example, let me add the heading 2 in here and say that I'm going to display now the date time. I'm going to add date time, and I can say, for example, now, and I'm going to save to short date string, for example, and I can also put in other example, for example, on heading 3, and I can say at and date time dot now dot too long date string, like this one. Let me use the hot load and see if it can get the job done. And let's wait. Prime. Okay, cool. So let's go back to the browser. You can see that it was able to bring these time zones. This is like this one. So whenever I go and change to Spanish, you can see that now it is changing immediately. Okay, the next task that we need to do is now to change and navigate this project to .NET 8, and that will be in the other part that I will do about this topic, but it doesn't matter. You can go ahead and see on how you can use it into .NET 8. Okay, I hope guys you found this video interesting and you liked it. So help me out by pressing the like button. If you are coming on the channel for the first time and you want to learn more about C#, .NET and Blazor, you can go ahead and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, there will be a Patreon link in the description. Make sure to check the description for this code. I'm going to upload this code to the GitHub so that everyone can go and use them at his or her own interest. So bye for now. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace. Thanks for watching.